So, Austrofascism, Dollfuss, Schuschnigg, and all the followers. So, before beginning with this video, allow me to do a forward. So, what's Austrofascism? Austrofascism is basically an ideology, a fascist ideology that stems from Italian fascism, from Mussolini fascism. With one particular, it is quite different from Italian fascism because there are also Catholic. It is also inspired to Catholic values, so it's more like Spanish Frankism, and it was the main ideology of Austria in the early 30s, before the Anschluss. And then we'll talk about the Anschluss later on, at the end of this video. So, of course, this is very important because if we don't know what Austrofascism is, we cannot move on and, of course, jump to the main topic. And so the July putsch of 1934 was very crucial for the history of Austria because of the many events that occurred, and it started on the 25th of July 1934, the day when Dollfuss was assassinated. So Dollfuss, more or less, so we can say that the Austrian population, Austrian public opinion was split in two. So you got the Austrofascists from one side. They proudly declared themselves as to be Christian Catholics and Germans. So we are Germans and Catholics. We are not part of Greater Germany, but we are also Austrians. That's like nationalists in Austria-Hungary claim to be. So we want to be Austrians, and at the same time we want to be Germans. Okay, and you got the Nazis, so the one that wished the Anschluss, so an annexation to Greater Germany, because they felt to be part of the Volk. Hitler said, "Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer." Well, you can, of course, disagree or not. I disagree, of course. You got many varieties, there are many nuances. You got Austria, you got Bavaria, you got Lutheran, Saxony, Brandenburg, you got former Prussia. So there are many regions throughout the German-speaking world. You got Switzerland, you got Liechtenstein, you got many places that are different, also linguistically and dialectally. Of course, I cannot tell you for sure how many Austrofascists and Nazis and pro-Nazi, pro-Hitler Nazis there were in Austria in the early 30s, because the distribution of them was polka dot. You got many Nazis in Carinthia, you got many Nazis in Syria, but also many in Vienna, etc. So in Tyrol there were many Austrofascists as well, because even according to Dollfuss, and during the First World War, Dollfuss served along the Kaiserjägers or the Schützen, Tyrolean Schützen, because he thought probably that Tyrol was the emblem of true Austria, true Catholic, traditional Austria. He introduced Austro-Hungarian, as he came to power in almost simultaneously, the very same month of the rise to power of Hitler. Of Hitler's rise to power, he became Chancellor of Austria. He entered the Chancellery, and all that followed. He introduced Austro-Hungarian uniforms. He was a proponent of monarchism, strategically, I think, because he thought that only monarchy could save Austria from Hitler's aims. He reintroduced the old anthem of the empire, emblems, Habsburg, the golden and black eagle, and the golden and black flag of Austria was white, and the emblems, and double-headed black eagle of Austria. All of these things were widespread in the country. They were widespread because of this pro-monarchist movement, supported by Dollfuss and other high-ranking members of the party, so the National Front of Austria, and the symbol was a cross with some squared edges. Yeah. And basically, so what happened? What happened? That the Dollfuss established a totalitarian regime from the start. He abolished the multi-party system. He did his utmost to prevent a return to traditional democracy. He abolished the Communist Party of Austria. That was very important, but not as much as important as the German one or the Prussian one. He also uttered some speeches where he denounced the multi-party system, where he supported the corporate state. So we are not capitalists nor communists. So we decry communism and capitalism. We are for the third way, and this is a feature of fascist Italy, Mussolini regime. And Mussolini was a strategic ally of Austria. Then, of course, he was a fervent Catholic. He was not meant to become a politician. He was meant to become a priest. He attended the seminary. He was a seminarist. So, yeah. But he thought that there was a problem in Austria. So he knew that Austria needed a strong man to rule. And so, yeah. But not everyone in Austria agreed with him. There were Nazis throughout the country, like Hitler himself. There was an Austrian from Braunau on in, from Upper Austria, the very same region of Dollfuss. So they were from the same state, we can say. With the only difference that Hitler didn't serve along the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but along Prussia, for Prussia, on the Western Front, whereas Dollfuss served along the Tyrolean provincial army, so in Tyrol. And so yeah, they were made different. They were from the same place, but they were made different. They were very, very different. They were very different. After 1 year, of course, the situation was very tense, because Nazis, of course, were armed. There were, of course, the abolition, the banning of the Austrian Nazi Party was what brought Dollfuss to his grave, because it triggered unrest, confusion, and the risk of a revolution, of a coup. And of course, the July putsch of 1934 was a direct consequence of this. In fact, many Austrian Nazis joined expatriated. Some of them operated illegally in Austria, within Austrian borders. Some others expatriated to Hungary, to Yugoslavia, to nearby Bavaria, depending on the region where they came. They joined the Austrian Legion that was made of Austrian Nazis that later on invaded Austria during the days of the putsch. Some of them even invaded Austria unarmed, because they thought that the border police would join them, but it was not the case, of course. They remained loyal. Of course, the putsch was averted because many people in Austria remained loyal. The Bundesheer, the Federal Army, the Tyroleans, etc., they remained loyal to Dollfuss, to the Austro-fascist regime. The coup lasted 5 days. Okay, the very same day, of course, 100 SS and Austro-fascists, and Austro-Nazis, disguised as Bundesheer soldiers, so as Federal Austrian soldiers. They didn't arise any doubt, any suspect. They broke into the building of the Chancellery, close to Hofburg, and I don't know if you've ever been to Vienna, but it is close to Hofburg. It is north of Hofburg and close to the Reichstag as well, so in the very center of the city. they broke into it, they found Dolphus in one room and they shot him dead. And Otto Plater was the murderer, so a prominent Austrian Nazi that was beaten. Of course, the conspirationists, the murderers of Dolphus murderers, were not only brought to justice and hanged, but they were also beaten by the crowd, because they were. I mean, the situation was very tense. Some of them, one of them or two, were beaten. I don't remember the names, but were beaten to the point that they were brought to the gallows on a stretcher. I don't know if you have any clue about that. And almost simultaneously, a part of Nazis, of putschists, that organized the coup, attacked the Ravag building. So Ravag was basically the Vienna radio station, radio building. There was also a tool of the political propaganda by Dolphus and Rushdie, etc. So because radio, like cinema in the 30s, was a mean of propaganda in totalitarian regimes. And Austria was no exception. So radio was a tool of propaganda. They broke into that, they took control of it, they killed somebody. I don't remember who. Well, I'm not an acclaimed historian. I know things like because I'm a devotee, and I want to be as much concise as I can, but I think I will fail to. And they broke into the Ravag building, so the radio building, in order to spread the fake message of Dolphus' resignation. Of course, Dolphus was killed shortly before or shortly after. In the following days, it was understood that there was a link between the Bavarian Nazis and the July Putsch. So Nazi Bavaria was, many Bavarians were Democrats, were Christian Democrats, but they were not really Nazis, but some of them were Nazis. There was a link between Bavaria and the July Putsch. At the frontier, at the border with Austria, one spy was arrested carrying specific detailed information about the putsch, so which made everyone think that Bavaria had links with it, was involved in all this. There were, of course, there followed a wave of fighting throughout Austria, especially in Carinthia, in Styria and Salzburg. Hundreds of people perished, of course, during fighting. Some others were expelled, some others were brought to justice. Overall, this is very important. So the role of Italy in all of this, Mussolini, Italy were, of course, offered some help in case of a German invasion. Mussolini was outraged and very angry at Dolphus' killing, because he even cried silently. He even cried, not because, of course, he was a friend of Dolphus, but because he needed a buffer state. Austria worked as a buffer zone between Germany and Italy, of course. And Mussolini wanted a buffer state and a strong government. He even supported the return of the Habsburg, even offering one of the daughters of the Italian king to the claimant, to the Habsburg claimant that was in exile in Belgium, Otto von Habsburg, that never came back. Of course, Hitler will take revenge on the Habsburgs. The very first two Austrians to be prosecuted and deported to Dachau were Franz Ferdinand children, the males, of course. Sophie von Auenberg was in Czechoslovakia at the time, so she was not deported, she was not touched by that. But that's another story, that's beside the point. Of course, Mussolini threatened to intervene if Germany invaded Austria. He exhorted Mussolini. At the time, Italy was quite important. So, according to some historians, Austria was heavily dependent on Italy. It depended on its diplomacy, depended on its friendship, strategic friendship, and the country was, of course, tiny and also defenseless. Then, of course, he exhorted Hitler not to invade the country, and Hitler then accepted it. And, of course, he kept his distance from the coup, and the coup was eventually averted. This ultimately led to its failure. Okay. Here comes the good stuff. Mussolini later changed his mind. So the Austro-Fascist regime didn't come to an end. Of course, Kurt Schuschnigg, that was probably the number 2 in the party, was very close to the office. He was a Carinthian of Slovenian background. Schuschnigg is a Germanized Slovenian surname, but that's irrelevant. He was a traditionalist, etc. So he was a supporter of Austro-Fascism. He succeeded after Adolfo's killing, and ruled until the Anschluss. Of course, here comes the good stuff. Mussolini changed his mind in 1936, which was also the year of the beginning of the Abyssinian campaign. So Italy wanted to found an empire. It already had a tiny one, but Abyssinia, present-day Ethiopia, was still an independent country, the sole independent country in all Africa. Of course, he changed his mind for a twofold reason. So he accepted, he welcomed the Nazi ideology of the master race, so the white man against the black man, against the non-white. And then, of course, he believed that Austria was very tiny and defenseless, so that it was opportune to ally with Hitler in time, so before Hitler invaded Austria, because an invasion of Austria was imminent and nobody could escape it. Schuschnigg was terrified by this, and he knew that. Even Dolphus was. So Mussolini. So the turning point was the abandonment of Mussolini. Mussolini abandoned Austria, and Schuschnigg was with his back on the wall. He was speechless. He couldn't believe his eyes, and of course, Austria alone had a couple of years left of life before being engulfed, before being swallowed by Germany. And in fact, in March 1938, the 12th, the Anschluss, which in German means connection, not annexation, occurred without shooting a bullet. It was not bloodshed, no. Without shooting a bullet. Because Schuschnigg exhorted the population and the army to not to resist. Don't resist, because it is a lost battle. Germans are far stronger than us. We are tiny and defenseless, and we cannot count on our former ally Italy that abandoned us. But before that, there was a meeting between Schuschnigg and Hitler at Berchtesgaden, so close to Salzburg, in nearby Bavaria. Berchtesgaden was the home of the Eagle's Nest, so Hitler mountain residence. It was built there because before the Anschluss he could look on both countries, Austria, his birthplace, and Germany, my adoption place. So at the same time, I'm in Austria and in Germany. So this is what he thought. This is what Hitler said about the Eagle's Nest. And Schuschnigg, of course, was shocked. It was the umpteenth rant monologue of Hitler. So he launched an ultimatum to Austria. He exhorted Schuschnigg to free Nazi dissidents, to relegalize the Austrian Nazi Party, and to create a friendly pro-Nazi government. Of course, Schuschnigg had to comply with this because he feared for his life, he was shocked, he was in pain. When he came back to Austria, of course he was on rent, when he came back to Austria, he offered the chancellery to anyone he knew. They all turned it down because no way you keep. I mean, it is too dangerous, too dicey. It is a risk I cannot take. And then he, after the speech, a radio speech, that where he resigned and said, this very day or the following one, Germany will invade us, and of course the Anschluss will take place without resisting, without opposing it. Don't oppose them. Of course, he was feeling very down for that. After the Anschluss, that occurred a couple of hours, probably 10 hours later of the speech. So at midnight of the following day, German troops entered Austria to annex it. Hitler followed the German troops in the hours to follow, and Schuschnigg, of course, was put under house arrest. He was arrested. He was later imprisoned in a concentration camp. He didn't die. He was not killed. He survived the war. He immigrated to the United States, and then he came back to Austria. So, of course, he lived until the 80s, or the 70s, late 70s. So he didn't come a cropper, using an informal term. He lived, of course. He preferred to live instead of being killed, because even if he opposed Hitler, if he had opposed Hitler, he would have been killed, and the Anschluss would have taken place anyway. So yeah, he acted wisely, I think. Of course, after the speech, I will conclude by saying this, that after the speech Kurt Schuschnigg uttered at the radio, pro-Nazi supporters in Austria almost simultaneously showed Nazi flags and banners, so Austria was already next after that speech. So they couldn't wait for that moment. They were really looking forward to that moment. And when you hear about the fact that German troops were welcomed with open arms, well, those were the Nazis. But in Austria there were many Austro-fascists that opposed it. Even the Habsburgs were against it. Franz Josef Mistress closed his house, closed her house windows when German troops arrived. Okay, my camera unexpectedly abandoned me for no apparent reason. Yeah, as much as Mussolini abandoned Dollfuss, as I was telling you before. I would like to conclude this video. I was talking about Franz Josef Mistress, that when German troops entered Austria, the day of the Anschluss, she closed all her windows, well, in response to it, opposing it, because the Habsburgs were fervent anti-Nazis. And I will show you some pictures of what I talked about. So the first one is this. So it shows pushers being arrested by Austrian police. Okay. This is an image of pushers that stormed the Ravok building, so the Vienna radio building, being arrested, raising their hands, their arms. This is the front page of a prominent Italian newspaper showing a funeral, Dollfuss state funeral In the middle you got Dolphus' wife being completely veiled in mourn. Here is a picture of Dolphus being laid to rest before being buried. Here is another picture of Dolphus' funeral with his wife in the middle, completely veiled. She was a Prussian, converted to Catholicism. And this is an image of Rava building storming. Yeah, and I will show you, before concluding this video, once for all, a map of central Vienna. Okay, a map of central Vienna, and the specific place, so where the building of the chancellery still stands to this day. So the one with a green roof, it is a beautiful Baroque palace. I love Baroque architecture. It is the most delightful, very elegant, very smart. And this is still this building still houses the chancellery. On your right you got the Hofburg Palace. The Hofburg complex is so it is of many different epochs, and somewhere over the woods you got the parliament, the Reichstag. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Just comment below and comment if you have any questions about this topic. I'm willing to, don't hesitate to ask any. I will answer you. And yeah, see you next time.